At our daughter's graduation dinner, Daniel smugly said, "I've found someone younger, and I'm leaving you," his voice echoing across the opulent hotel dining room. I saw parents in the vicinity turn to gaze as the words lingered in the air like poison. An hour had passed since Sophia's valedictorian ceremony, and now my husband of 26 years had decided to ruin our family in front of everyone we knew. Cecilia Martinez is my name. Here in Denver, Colorado, I am 51 years old and the director of marketing at Loomer and Publishing. I had put up with Daniel's increasingly harsh behavior, late nights, mysterious absences, and blatant extramarital relationships for years. But tonight, I felt nothing but serene resolve as I stood in my gorgeous blue dress and watched him grin contentedly. "Actually, Daniel," I murmured, steadily placing my champagne glass down. "The timing couldn't be better. I have something of my own to announce." The mutter of startled discussion surrounding us was broken by my bold and clear voice. "I'm also leaving you for someone younger, actually, much younger." Daniel's arrogant look wavered briefly before coming back with a fury. "Stop being so dumb, Cecilia. A woman your age would be desired by whom? If you believe you can outperform me, you're insane." I grinned calmly, as I had mastered in all those board meetings where I was undervalued by males. "Mike Peterson is his name. Maybe you've heard of him. Tall, intelligent, and endearing. Your supervisor." Daniel's face lost color so fast that I was afraid he could pass out. The confidence that had exuded from him seconds earlier vanished entirely, and his lips opened and closed like a fish struggling for oxygen. The reception had quieted down around us, and I could sense that scores of people were observing our scene. "That's impossible," Daniel said. But his eyes were showing signs of worry. It wasn't impossible, he knew. He was well aware of Mike Peterson's identity. More significantly, he was aware of the damage that a single phone call from Mike Peterson could do to his career. At that moment, Sophia came to my side and put her arm through mine in a show of support that filled my heart with pride. My 22-year-old daughter was intelligent and had not acquired any of her father's harshness. After years of seeing him harm me, she was finally ready to see me fight back tonight. Even though I could hear the trembling behind her voice, Sophia replied, "Dad," gently and steadily. "Mom is worthy of better than the way you've handled her. We are all aware of your troubles. She deserves to be happy now." Now there was utter silence in the room as everyone waited to see what would happen. I felt the first flare of satisfaction I had felt in years as I gazed at Daniel's pale, astonished face. Although I wasn't aware of it at the time, the route that brought me to this point had been developing for years. Daniel and I were both driven marketing students who wanted to make a difference in the world when we first met in college. He was endearing and self-assured, and I liked his assurance about everything. After getting married young and having Sophia 2 years later, we made Denver our home and had what I considered to be a happy life. However, at some point, Daniel's desire had devolved into brutality and his confidence had curdled into arrogance. Instead of treating me as a spouse, he started to treat me as a tool to help him succeed. Instead of joining me in celebrating my promotion to marketing director at Loomer Publishing 3 years ago, he made disparaging remarks about how I was becoming arrogant and losing my position. Around that time, or at least when I first became aware of them, the affairs began. Perfume-scented late evenings at the workplace. Strange phone conversations that ceased as soon as I entered the room. Charges on my credit card in eateries I had never visited. He laughed in my face when I challenged him once, accusing me of being jealous and paranoid. Sophia was aware. Youngsters are always more knowledgeable than their parents believe. She had seen him on the phone several times with his secretary. Had witnessed his disdainful treatment of me when he believed no one was looking. She sat me down and told me I deserved more when she returned home from college for Christmas last year. She had remarked, "Mom, you're brilliant and beautiful and kind," while crying. "A person who doesn't value you doesn't have to be your partner. Now that I'm older, I can manage whatever you decide." A seed had been sown by that discourse, and it developed gradually over the next months. I started to focus more on how I looked, not for Daniel, but for me. As I had always intended to do, I began attending evening sessions in French. I started to recall my identity before to being Sophia's mother and Daniel's wife. I met Mike Peterson that way. He came to speak as a guest lecturer on international business communication in my French class. Mike was the youngest vice president at Daniel's firm, Velhorn Global, at the age of 35. Although Daniel seldom ever acknowledged that Mike was in charge of their section, he was also Daniel's immediate boss. Mike was knowledgeable, kind, and truly interested in what I had to say, everything Daniel wasn't. I immediately accepted his invitation to get coffee with him after class. He stared at me as if I were important, so I believed him when he told me that I was the most intriguing woman he had ever encountered. I had forgotten that true affection and respect could be the foundation of the connection that grew between us over the next few months. When Daniel embarrassed me at his company's annual dinner 6 months ago, I finally recognized how toxic my marriage had become. In order to help Le Moran Publishing with their global development, I spent weeks creating a presentation on cross-cultural marketing techniques. I couldn't wait to discuss my thoughts with other industry experts. But before I could say anything more, Daniel burst out laughing. I apologize to all of you. My wife occasionally forgets that she isn't truly competent to discuss international business. She is employed by a small publishing business rather than a large multinational. The room fell silent, and I felt heat flood my cheeks. But instead of backing down, I looked directly at Mike Peterson, who was sitting at the head table with the other executives. His jaw was tight with anger, and when our eyes met, he gave me an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the humiliation burning in my chest, Le Moran Publishing just secured a $15 million contract with European distributors using the exact strategies I was about to discuss. But perhaps this isn't the right audience for that level of detail. I sat down to polite applause, but the damage was done. Daniel had shown everyone exactly how little he respected me, and I had finally seen him clearly for the small, cruel man he really was. Mike approached me during the cocktail hour afterward. "I'm sorry about what happened in there," he said quietly. "Your husband was completely out of line." "He usually is," I replied, surprised by my own honesty. "Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? I'd love to hear more about your marketing strategies, and I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity with you." That dinner changed everything. Mike told me about Velhorn Global's plans to expand their European operations and how they needed someone with my exact skill set to head their new Paris office. He also told me he found me brilliant, beautiful, and inspiring, words I hadn't heard from a man in years. "I know your situation is complicated," he said as we walked to my car that night. "But I want you to know that you have options, both professionally and personally." The professional opportunity was real and substantial, a position as European Director of Marketing with a salary that was nearly double what I made at Le Moran. The personal opportunity was more complex, but equally appealing, a chance to be with someone who valued me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. Over the following months, as Mike and I grew closer, I began to understand what a healthy relationship looked like. He never spoke to me with contempt, never dismissed my ideas, never made me feel small or foolish. When I told him about Daniel's affairs, he didn't tell me I was imagining things or being dramatic. He simply held me and told me I deserved so much better. The plan we developed together was elegant in its simplicity. Let Daniel dig his own grave, then bury him in it. The weeks leading up to Sophia's graduation were a careful balancing act. Daniel had no idea that his boss was courting his wife, both professionally and personally. Mike and I were discreet, meeting for coffee in neighborhoods across town, taking long walks in parks where Daniel would never think to look for me. But our relationship was deepening every day. "I've never felt this way about anyone," Mike told me one evening as we sat by the lake watching the sunset. "Age is just a number, Cecilia. What matters is how we connect, how we understand each other." He was right. Despite the 16-year age difference, Mike and I had a connection I had never experienced with Daniel, even in our early years. We talked about books, about travel, about our dreams for the future. He listened when I spoke about my work, offered insights that helped me see problems from new angles, celebrated my successes without jealousy or condescension. Meanwhile, Daniel was becoming increasingly reckless in his behavior. His affair with his 25-year-old secretary, Jennifer, was now an open secret at Velhorn Global. They took long lunches together, stayed late at the office, and Daniel had even been seen kissing her in the parking garage. Mike, as his supervisor, was keeping detailed records of every inappropriate incident. "I won't lie to you," Mike said during one of our evening walks. "Daniel's behavior is creating problems for the entire department. His work quality has declined. He's missing important meetings, and the other employees are losing respect for him. I'm going to have to address it soon." But we both knew the real confrontation would come at Sophia's graduation. Daniel had been dropping hints for weeks about major changes coming to our family. He was planning something dramatic, and we were ready for him. Sophia was in on our plan, of course. My brilliant daughter had figured out that her mother was happier than she had been in years. And when I finally told her about Mike, she was delighted. "Mom, you're glowing," she said during one of our lunch dates. "I haven't seen you smile like this since I was little. Whoever this man is, he's good for you." When I told her it was Mike Peterson, her father's boss, her eyes lit up with mischievous delight. "Oh, this is perfect. Dad has been bragging for months about how important he is at Velhorn, but he never mentions that Mike Peterson is the one actually running everything. He's going to lose his mind." The graduation ceremony itself was beautiful. Sophia gave a spectacular valedictorian speech about having the courage to pursue your dreams and not settling for less than you deserve. I caught Mike's eye in the audience and saw him smile. He knew, as I did, that Sophia's words were meant for me as much as for her graduating class. At the reception afterward, Daniel was in his element, playing the proud father and successful businessman. He had no idea that his world was about to crumble. I watched him work the room, introducing himself to other parents with pompous confidence, bragging about his position at Velhorn Global. "My husband is quite the performer," I murmured to Mike when he approached our table. "Not for much longer," Mike replied quietly, his hand briefly touching mine under the table. "Are you ready for this?" I looked across the room at Daniel, who was laughing too loudly at his own jokes, while Jennifer hung on his arm like an expensive accessory. I thought about all the years of humiliation, all the times he had made me feel small and worthless. All the nights I had cried myself to sleep wondering what I had done wrong. "I've been ready for this for years," I told Mike. "Let's end this charade." Daniel chose his moment carefully, waiting until most of the other families had finished their dinners and were mingling around the reception hall. He stood up with theatrical flair, tapping his wine glass to get everyone's attention. I recognized the look on his face, the satisfied smirk of a man who believed he was about to deliver a devastating blow. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying across the room with practiced confidence. "I have an announcement to make on this special day." Sophia shot me a worried look, but I squeezed her hand reassuringly. We had prepared for this moment. Mike, sitting at a nearby table with some of the other executives, looked calm and ready. 26 years ago, I married my college sweetheart," Daniel continued, gesturing toward me with false sentimentality. "We've had a good run, raised a wonderful daughter, but sometimes in life, you have to make difficult choices." The room was quiet now, sensing drama. I could see other parents shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether they should be witnessing this moment. "I found someone who makes me feel young again," Daniel said, his voice gaining confidence, "someone who appreciates me for who I am and what I've accomplished, someone who doesn't spend her time criticizing me or trying to compete with me professionally." I almost laughed at that last comment. Daniel had always been threatened by my success, unable to handle the fact that his wife might be as capable as he was. Jennifer, standing beside him like a trophy, beamed with the confidence of a woman who believed she had won some kind of prize. "So, tonight I'm announcing that I'm leaving my wife for someone younger, someone who understands what a successful man needs in a partner." The gasp that went through the room was audible. Several people looked at me with pity, expecting to see a broken woman humiliated in front of her peers. Instead, they saw me stand up slowly, smoothing my dress, a serene smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "How interesting," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I have an announcement of my own." Daniel's confident expression flickered for just a moment. He hadn't expected me to respond, had probably thought I would run from the room in tears or beg him to reconsider. But I had spent months preparing for this moment, and I was finally ready to claim my power. You're absolutely right, Daniel. 26 years is a long time to spend with someone who doesn't appreciate you. Someone who treats you with contempt, who belittles your accomplishments, who thinks so little of you that he flaunts his affairs without even trying to hide them. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't going the way Daniel had planned. So, I'm also leaving, I continued, taking a step closer to him, for someone younger, much younger actually, someone who values intelligence over arrogance, kindness over cruelty. Someone who sees me as an equal partner rather than a convenient accessory. Daniel's face was beginning to change color, the confident smirk fading into something closer to panic. Don't be ridiculous, Cecilia. You're 51 years old. What man would want? Mike Peterson, I said clearly, cutting him off. Perhaps you know him. Tall, brilliant, charming. He's your boss, Daniel. Your direct supervisor at Velhorn Global. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's mouth fell open, and I watched as the implications hit him like a physical blow. Jennifer looked confused, clearly not understanding the significance of what I had just revealed. That's impossible, Daniel whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew Mike Peterson. He knew exactly how powerful Mike was at Velhorn Global. And more importantly, he knew what this meant for his career. Not impossible, I said gently. Just surprising to you. The explosion, when it came, was spectacular. Daniel's face went from pale to bright red in the span of seconds. And when he finally found his voice, it came out as a roar of rage and disbelief. You're lying, he shouted, loud enough to make several people jump. There's no way Mike Peterson would want anything to do with a woman like you. You're nobody. You work for a tiny publishing company. Actually, came a calm voice from across the room. Cecilia works for one of our most valued partner companies. All heads turned toward Mike Peterson as he stood up from his table, tall and confident in his perfectly tailored suit. He moved through the crowd with easy grace, his presence commanding attention in a way that Daniel's theatrical outburst never could. Lumarin Publishing, Mike continued as he reached our table, just secured a major international contract that will bring $15 million in new business to our European operations. Cecilia developed the entire marketing strategy that made that deal possible. He stopped beside me, not touching me, but close enough that his support was unmistakable. She's also accepted my offer to head our new Paris office as European Director of Marketing. We'll be relocating there next month. The room erupted in whispers and murmurs. Parents who moments before had been watching a family drama were now witnessing what was clearly a professional power play as well as a personal one. Daniel looked like he was going to have a stroke. His face was purple now and veins were standing out on his forehead. This is insane. You can't do this to me. I work for you. You work for Velhorn Global, Mike corrected politely. And your performance reviews have been concerning for quite some time. Your supervisor, that would be me, has documented numerous instances of unprofessional behavior, declining work quality, and inappropriate conduct with subordinate employees. He glanced meaningfully at Jennifer, who was beginning to look less confident and more worried. In fact, Mike continued, I was planning to discuss your future with the company after the graduation festivities concluded. But since you've chosen to make this a public matter, perhaps we should address it now. You can't fire me, Daniel sputtered. I've been with the company for 12 years. I have seniority. Seniority doesn't protect employees who violate company policies regarding workplace relationships and professional conduct, Mike replied coolly, particularly when those violations create liability issues for the corporation. Sophia, who had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, suddenly stood up and moved to my other side. Dad, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room, everyone knows about your affairs. Everyone knows how you've treated Mom. Did you really think you could humiliate her like this and face no consequences? The support from my daughter was the final piece of strength I needed. I looked around the room at all the faces watching us, some shocked, some sympathetic, some clearly entertained by the drama, and felt a surge of confidence I hadn't experienced in years. Daniel, I said, my voice calm and clear, you've spent years making me feel small and worthless. You've told me I'm too old, too boring, too ordinary to deserve better treatment. But you were wrong. Mike sees me as I really am, intelligent, capable, and worthy of love and respect. I paused, looking directly into his shocked eyes. Tomorrow morning, Mike and I will begin planning our move to Paris. You, on the other hand, will be cleaning out your office and looking for a new job. I hope Jennifer is prepared to support you because your days of riding on your wife's patience and your boss's tolerance are officially over. The satisfaction I felt watching Daniel's world crumble around him was sweeter than any revenge I could have imagined. The aftermath of my announcement rippled through the reception like an earthquake. Daniel stood frozen in the center of the room, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to process what had just happened. The confident, arrogant man who had tried to humiliate me minutes earlier was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and desperate. This isn't over, he finally managed to say, but his voice cracked on the words. You can't just destroy my life like this. Calmly, I didn't destroy your life, Daniel, I answered. You committed years of violence and adultery yourself. I'm just going to quit allowing it. Jennifer, who had been standing next to Daniel like a pretty ornament, was starting to realize how serious this was. Wait, she cried in a high-pitched, frantic voice. Are you about to lose your job? However, you claim to be significant to the business. You claim to have earned 6 figures. Daniel yelled, I do make 6 figures at her. This is merely a miscommunication of some sort. We can figure this out, Mike. You're doing something wrong. However, Mike had stopped even glancing at him. My heart was fluttering because of the tenderness and admiration with which he was staring at me. Cecilia, he murmured, do you want to dance? I believe we have a cause for celebration. Other couples were dancing while the band continued to play. However, I sensed that everyone in the room was observing us as Mike ushered me onto the floor. I didn't give a damn. I felt liberated, appreciated, and beautiful for the first time in years. Mike whispered in my ear, you were magnificent, as we moved to the tunes. I've never seen anything as satisfying as watching that pompous fool realize his world was falling apart. Daniel was trying to reassure Jennifer that this was merely a momentary setback, and I could hear his voice rising in terror behind us. The full impact of what had transpired started to set in as Mike and I danced, not only for me but also for everyone else in the room. In the presence of his daughter's whole graduating class and their relatives, Daniel's meticulously crafted facade of power and achievement had fallen apart. The man who had attempted to make me seem bad was now standing by himself while his wife danced with his boss. The lady he had written off as useless was obviously winning this very public battle. With tears of pride in her eyes, Sophia came up to us on the dance floor. She said, Mom, I'm really proud of you. You were amazing. I said, thank you, sweetheart, and drew her into our embrace. I'm sorry you had to see that disgusting thing. But I had to stop allowing him to harm me. The words, I'm glad you fought back, came out of Sophia's head. He deserved everything he got and more. Daniel was engaged in a heated discussion with a number of other Velhorn Global staff members who had attended the graduation across the room. He was trying to convince them that he was the victim of some complex scheme, and his gestures were getting more and more desperate. However, these were individuals who had spent years working with Mike and Daniel. They were aware of which individual was a respected leader and which was only a conceited middle manager. As the truth of Daniel's predicament became apparent, Jennifer's expression grew more uneasy. She took out her phone and started typing frantically, most likely texting pals about this sudden change. A lady was learning that her reward was a soon-to-be unemployed guy with no prospects and a damaged reputation, even though she had believed she was trading up for a successful older man. As I observed Daniel's frantic efforts to salvage anything from the rubble of his evening, I was overcome by the sweet taste of vindication. Instead of causing me to suffer in public, he had destroyed himself and elevated me to a level he could never achieve. Daniel's demise was complete and quick. His job was terminated for violating corporate regulations regarding professional behavior and workplace conduct, and he was taken out of the Velhorn Global headquarters with a security guard within a week of Sophia's graduation. Jennifer, The young secretary, who had been so sure of her future with a prosperous older guy, vanished from his life as soon as she found out he was unemployed and in danger of becoming bankrupt. As a result, he failed to find employment that earned even half of his previous income, and his image in Denver's business scene was ruined. Since I had records of his extramarital activities and our prenuptial agreement safeguarded my assets, the divorce process was harsh for him. A damaged man who had staked all on his power to dominate and devalue me, he was compelled to sell his pricey automobile and relocate into a tiny apartment. 3 months later, Mike and I relocated to Paris, where I successfully and passionately poured myself into my new position as European Director of Marketing. The city welcomed us as a couple, and I learned that since it was based on sincere respect and understanding, love in your 50s may be even more satisfying than adolescent passion. As I reflected on that evening at Sophia's graduation, I saw that Daniel's brutality had unintentionally given me the greatest gift of my life, the drive to finally assert my right to happiness and respect, as well as the joy of seeing a bully suffer the repercussions of his own behavior.